just another day. It's just another day.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. And today, I'm going to be reviewing the 132 scale Koenigsegg Agera R by Double Horses. This is the car that succeeded the CCX. This is the car that made thousands of kids replace their favorite Lamborghini and Ferrari posters on their bedroom walls, and even outshine the Bugatti. This is the most famous Koenigsegg. Christian von Koenigsegg designed this car with the intention of surpassing the fastest car in the world at the time, which was the Bugatti Veyron. And it did. And Bugatti engineered the Chiron as a response. But instead of beating the Chiron with another Koenigsegg, like the Agera for example, Christian just kept tuning the Agera until it managed to beat the Chiron as well. And that was the last iteration of the Agera, the Agera RS. And if you've heard about the Koenigsegg 1-to-1, that's also a car based on the Agera platform, basically a lightweight carbon fiber variant which puts out 1 horsepower per kilogram, hence 1-to-1, a ratio that is almost impossible to achieve. This is the largest diecast Koenigsegg Agera you can buy without being forced to pay an ungodly amount of money. Because the recent 118 auto art Koenigsegg's that you can still find for MSRP are all composite, right? Which is a fancy word for plastic. The last diecast Koenigsegg auto art made in 118 scale was the Agera, and back in the day it had an MSRP of €250. Which was almost like a decade ago. I mean, today, if you want to get it, wow, just wow. So that brings us to this one here. A 132 scale diecast Agera. Slightly bigger than the 143 versions, and fully opening. Unlicensed China model. Just like the CCX I reviewed a little while ago. Great models for the price though, which was less than $20. But even here, I had to add some additional details to the model to make it look more like the real Agera that came out in 2010 and whose production lasted until 2018, with a total of 58 cars produced. So without further ado, let's take a look at this car from the front. So here at the front of the Agera is where I did the most changes to the car, because the first thing that I did was I actually had to replace the headlights. And the simplest method of doing that is to simply print the Agera's headlights on a sheet of paper and then cut it and paste it over the headlamp covers. Because in this picture you can see what the headlights of this model really looked like, and they were just absolute garbage. Because they were just like plain silver, there was no shading whatsoever inside the headlight housing. And yeah, now they kind of look pasted on, but from a distance, and in real life at least, they look a lot more convincing than the previous headlights. However, the rest of the front is done pretty well by the manufacturer, because in between the headlights you can see the Koenigsegg crest, and this one has a lot more detail than the one on the CCX. We also have the iconic black trim that looks like a pair of fangs descending onto the crest from either side. And in between those trim lines you have, on the real car, a small badge that says Koenigsegg, but here it actually says Racing. And below the headlights we have multiple air intakes. What's also cool about the exterior of this car is that the manufacturer made sure to include the iconic louvers above the front wheels and the rear wheels. And these are made out of black plastic. So they're separate pieces, they're not the same as the rest of the diecast car body. And overall, I think that the red and black paint job, which is like the one on the real Agera, is done pretty well actually. The paint quality is also really good. And here's a look at the Koenigsegg Agera's iconic side profile. Doesn't look a whole lot different to the CCX, its predecessor, because it has the big iconic air scoop along the side. And behind it, there is a little inscription. On the real car, it would say Agera R. And it kind of looks like it says the same thing here on this model. But if you look really closely, it says A Racing R. Probably for copyright reasons, considering this is an unlicensed model. But everything else looks very authentic, including the thin black trim for the air vents right after the front wheel. And if you look at the wheels, you can see that the manufacturer, Double Horses, did provide us with brake discs and calipers, and the discs are even ventilated. However, they're all part of the rim, so they don't have any depth to them. I mean, I suppose it's better than having no discs and calipers at all, but still, it doesn't look very realistic. If you remember my review of the Lamborghini Veneno, I actually did a lot of repainting on its wheels to make it look more like the real Veneno's wheels. Here, however, I just left everything as is, because I kind of like the brushed aluminum look of the rims, even though on the real Koenigsegg Agera, they're completely gloss black, and they have like this white trim running around at the edge of the rim, but I wouldn't have been able to replicate that here. What I also did was paint the mirrors in black, and there's also the A-pillar, which I painted in black, and the trim around the big windshield to make it look more like the proportions on the real Agera. And now moving over to the back of the Koenigsegg Agera. The back also looks impressive, just like the front. In fact, I dare say it looks even better than the front, because I really didn't have to do a lot of improvements here to the back. The first thing that I did was I painted the center of the exhaust in black, because the trim looks really nice in this brushed aluminum finish, but the center was unpainted. And then I also painted the interior of this taillight in black, because it was just like a red plastic piece. And then there is this little trim here, this sort of thin line, which I then painted in silver to make it look like the real taillight of the Agera. The rear license plate says A Racing R, again in this really stylized script that makes it look like it says Agera R from a distance. And then if you look further down, you can see that we have this rear diffuser here, with the individual diffuser blades also being molded pretty nicely. The rear grille is closed, of course, but you have a decent amount of detail, I'd say. Another improvement that I did was I painted the stocks of the spoiler, as well as the two black lines in the center of the spoiler. I also painted the base of the spoiler, which has these sort of triangular-shaped anchoring points in black, because all of this was just red body color. Cool thing about the back is that it actually opens. And it stays up. And now you can actually take a look at the engine of the Agera R. And it looks absolutely nothing like the real Koenigsegg's engine bay, but I mean, for a 132 scale toy model, I'd still say that this is pretty impressive. And so the real Agera has a 5-liter twin-turbo V8 that generates 947 horsepower on regular fuel and 1,124 horsepower on E85 biofuel, with a theoretical top speed of 439 kilometers per hour. Although I'm not aware of any Agera or Agera R hitting that mark. But the final version of this car, the Agera RS, managed to do even more than that. Now let's close this up. Now this car has a really cool feature, which is that we have a button right here, and if you press this button, the doors will swing open. The problem is that these doors are spring-loaded, which means that there's a spring right here and right here that sort of keeps the doors locked in place, and when you press this, the spring is forced open, so the doors sort of come open like this. And if you do that too much, then you will not be able to force the doors back in again. And that's the reason why I'm kind of hesitant doing it, but I will do it here to show you guys the interior of this car. And if the mechanism breaks, then the only way you can close the doors again is by gluing them shut. But here goes nothing. That's one door. There's a second one. And then you can move these doors like this. And this is what Koenigsegg calls the dihedral synchrohelix actuation mechanism. And it looks absolutely amazing on this 1/32 scale model because you just don't get this kind of detail for $16, $17 in the diecast world. But here you do, and that's pretty cool. And now let's check out the interior. And as you might expect from 1/32 scale models, the interior is really not a place where they put a lot of details. However, you can see that unlike the Koenigsegg CCX model, here they at least did try to mold that circular telephone dial style center console that the real Koenigsegg's have. Although it isn't painted, but I guess you could paint this if you wanted yourself with silver paint. We then also have air vents up there, although they are not painted, and they don't even have any real depth to them either. The seats have some texture, as you can see that there is a little bit of a diamond stitch pattern on them, and some seat belts, although nothing is painted. And the headrests do have the iconic shape of the real Agera seats. And now let's check out the driver's side of the Koenigsegg Agera. And again, there's not a whole lot of detail. I mean, the steering wheel is there. It does look like the real Agera steering wheel, but it has no details on it whatsoever. There's also no instrument panel, and there's really not much at all here. But still, it's a good-looking car in terms of the exterior. It really does look like an Agera, doesn't it? And finally, checking out the bottom of this car, you can see that this is a battery-operated car because it has this battery compartment here. Requires 3 1.5-volt batteries. And then over here, it says double horses, made in China. And I painted a little bit of the engine here, as you can see. And that's about it. So guys, thanks again for taking the time to watch my review of the 1/32 scale Koenigsegg Agera R by Double Horses. I wish there were more Koenigsegg's in diecast form. Unfortunately, they remain a very elusive brand. But I still think that this color option, this red and black trim, looks absolutely amazing, even on this budget model, and I love the doors as well. If you want more reviews like this, please make sure to watch my other videos here. And as always, take care, have a wonderful day. This is Imperial Diecast, signing out.